What is up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be all about study tips that I have for you guys to have a really successful semester. First things first, I got my hair done. I know my hair was short last time, but I got my hair done. I will leave all of the specs down below. Of course, this is hair from my website, so that's always down in the description box as well if you're interested. And yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say, other than you guys can't hear the air conditioning anymore because it is officially fall and it's cold enough outside to where I can turn it off and still be cold, because that's why I have on the sweater. So yeah, other than that, I think that was all that I wanted to say. So we're gonna get right into the video. The first tip that I have is to review the material before you go to class. So not necessarily thoroughly read through it and understand it. I mean, skim through the PowerPoint notes if your professor posts them before class, or if you have the textbook, skim through the chapter for the textbook, from the textbook, so you kind of have an understanding of what you're going to be talking about before you get to class. And when you're skimming, you may notice keywords, or in the PowerPoints, your professor may highlight certain things in the PowerPoint. So this is just giving your brain that first look into what you guys are going to be learning about. The second tip that I have is going to be kind of obvious, and that's take notes. So I prefer to take notes, like physically writing them down. Even if my professor provides the PowerPoint, I still like to write my notes out because that's another method of repetition for me. However, if you prefer to print out the PowerPoint notes, little things that your professors say that may not be on the notes, make sure you write that down as well, because I've noticed that a lot of times it's the small things that the professor says that he didn't put in the lecture notes, or she didn't put in the lecture notes, that somehow ends up on the exam. So when you write down those little tidbit of information, then when you see it on the exam, you'll be like, oh, okay, I remember it, instead of, did they say that? Or I don't remember them saying that. That's not in the book. So yeah. This next little tip is optional. This is just something that I do, but I personally like to outline my textbooks for certain classes. Like for math, obviously that's just not gonna work, but like my psych classes and other classes like that where I have a lot of reading, I do like to outline my textbook. I have a video on how I outline my textbook, so I will link that in the cards. But I like to outline my textbook after the professor goes over the material, not necessarily when they finish lecturing all of the material, but right after they introduce it. So for example, for my Psych and the Law class, we're on chapter 5. So I skimmed through chapter 5 in the textbook because she doesn't provide the PowerPoint notes, so we have to take notes in class. So before class, I skimmed through chapter 5, kind of got an idea of what she was going to be lecturing about. I went to class and she started chapter 5. I took my notes, and then after that class, either that same Monday or on Tuesday before class, my next class period with her, I outlined chapter 5 from my textbook. So I don't necessarily wait until she's finished lecturing the chapter. I kind of do it in between when she first started lecturing and then before my next class period, if that makes any sense. So again, like I said, that is optional, and that it's only going to work for some classes and not all, but that's just something that I like to do. I've said this in multiple videos, but repetition is key for me. So getting the information into my brain in different ways helps me. So the reviewing material before class, taking notes, outlining my textbook, those are all different ways that my brain is getting the material, and it actually sticks better that way for me. That's just a personal preference. Things may be a little bit different for you, but it is definitely important to learn what methods work best for you in terms of studying, just so you guys have an idea for when you sit down and study, you know this is what works and this isn't what works. Now, the next tip that I have is going to be the actual studying part, because all of that stuff that I mentioned before is kind of studying, but it's like the pre-studying, if that makes any sense. So when you're doing the note-taking and the outlining, that's putting the information into your brain as well. So I guess you can consider that a method of studying, but this is like when you're actually sitting down and actually studying for the exam. Like this is this part right here. So I already kind of gave a tip, and that is to figure out which method works best for you. There are different ways to study. For some people, repetition may not work for them. For some people, they can sit down 30 minutes before an exam and study, and that works. That it doesn't work for me, it works for other people. So another tip that I have is for some people, flashcards may work. For some classes, flashcards work for me. So you write down all the important terms or all the important ideas that you personally need to know. And you just basically, it's another method of repetition. You just constantly go through the flashcards. That will work if you have a class that is very vocabulary based, where the professor expects you to know a lot of vocab words. Flashcards would definitely help for that. For some of my neuroscience classes, a lot of my science classes, flashcards have worked because it's a lot of vocab words, and if you don't know the vocab words, you wouldn't understand the concepts themselves. So for certain classes, vocab words work for me. Another thing I highly recommend is if your professor provides you a study guide, do it. I had professors who provided me with study guides, and they were very helpful, and I've known people who didn't do them because they thought maybe the professor was trying to trick them, which some professors do try to trick you guys. I'm not going to say that that's not true, but I've had professors who've provided very detailed study guides on what we needed to know, and they were very helpful for the exam. So I definitely recommend, if your professor gives you a study guide, to definitely go through and do it. Even if half that material isn't on the exam, at least the other half is, and you studied it, so that works out. Now, if your professor doesn't provide you with a study guide, I highly recommend making your own study guide. And I know that kind of sounds intimidating, and I know you're kind of thinking, well, how do I know what to put on the study guide? So what most of my professors do is they, whether it's in their PowerPoint notes or on the syllabus, there's going to be somewhere where they put like kind of like a chapter outline per se. So what they're going to be going over, what they're going to be lecturing on, what they feel like that you should know. Because like, for example, for chapter 1, there may be 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and some professors may say, you know, we're going to cover 1.2, 1.3, you're going to skip 1.4, 1.5. So basically what I would do is know what your professor is lecturing on, know what they want you to know based on what they put in the lecture notes or on the syllabus, and go through and pick out the important concepts, the vocab words from the chapter, and kind of make it into your own study guide. Depending on, you know, how you want it to look, you can make the vocab words highlighted, you can use different symbols for different things. It just kind of depends on how you want your study guide to look. But if your professor doesn't provide you with one, I highly recommend making one. And what I do is, once I finish my study guides, again, repetition is key for me. I literally just constantly just read through my study guide, continuously read through my study guide for hours, because I've already gotten that exposure a couple of times before, and now I'm just basically re-going over the stuff that I already know, and I'm just constantly doing that. So it's constantly being reintroduced to my brain, so I'm more likely to remember that information. Now this next tip, it depends on the class. Again, this may work for you, this may not work for you, but I go through the textbook when I'm studying as well, especially if there's a concept that I'm a little bit fuzzy on, because I may have taken notes on it, but I may want to go straight to the source, i.e. the textbook, to really get the information. And sometimes your textbook gives you better examples than your professor may have given you, or they may give you better ways to remember the information. Like they may give you a mnemonic device, or like I said, they may give you better examples. So I do go to my notes sometimes, but a lot of times I like to have my textbook handy just in case I need to flip through and re-teach myself a concept that I may not understand as well as I thought I did. The last and most important tip that I have is to not study at the last minute. And I know I am the last person to be saying that, because I'm a procrastinator. If you guys watch my vlogs, you know I am like one of the biggest procrastinators. But please do not procrastinate when it comes to studying. It is recommended that you start studying at least a week in advance. So all of the stuff, like if you do all of the stuff that I mentioned in the beginning of this video, you've already introduced that material to your brain, so that way when you're studying, you don't have to study, like you have to study, but you don't have to like heavily study to the point where you feel like you're frying your brain. So that's why a lot of that introducing the material into your brain is very important, because when it comes time to actually sit down and study, you're not frying your brain trying to like learn everything at once. So I definitely recommend studying, if not a week in advance, a couple of days in advance. Don't try to learn everything the night before the exam, because you are going to fry your brain. So definitely give yourself some days to study. And another benefit of that is, like I said, if there's a concept or there's something that you don't understand, and you're looking through your notes, it's still not making sense. You're looking through your book, it's still not making sense. If you start studying a couple days in advance, it gives you time to email your professor or to meet with your professor so they can explain the concept over again. Because if you wait to start studying the night before the exam, if you email your professor at 11 p.m., the chances of them responding are slim to none. So then you go to class the next day and you still don't understand the concept because they didn't respond in a timely manner. And even if you ask them before the exam, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to actually get it, and they're not going to have enough time to explain it to you. So starting a few days in advance gives you time to actually learn everything and ask questions if you need to ask questions. Okay, you guys, that is it for this video. If you guys have any other study tips or any other things that you do when you're studying, please leave them down in the comments. Other people may benefit from them as well if they have similar study patterns as you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel before you leave. Also, leave any video requests down in the comments as well, and I will see you guys in my next video.